My workshop smells of cedar and patience. It's a scent that has more honesty in it than most conversations I've had. Here, value is a simple equation. It's the straightness of a cut, the seamlessness of a joint, the smooth, accepting grain of a piece of oak under my hand. Wood doesn't lie. It tells you its history in its rings and knots, and it responds to your skill, or lack thereof, with brutal fairness. For 10 years, this has been my sanctuary and my profession. I'm Leo, I'm 30, and I build furniture. I create things that are meant to last, to bear weight, to be a quiet, dependable part of people's lives. My own family, however, never quite knew what to make of me. Or rather, they knew exactly what to make of me. The background character. The quiet one, the sensitive one, the one who took a path they didn't understand and so chose to largely ignore. This role was cemented in contrast to my sister, Claire. Claire, 3 years my senior, is a financial analyst. She operates in a world of abstract numbers and projected earnings, a world my parents understood and applauded. She was the golden child, not because she was malicious, but because her brand of success was legible to them. It came with promotions, bonuses, and a corporate ladder you could point to. My success was measured in the heft of a dining table and the quiet satisfaction on a client's face. Metrics that never seemed to make it into the family newsletter. I remember one Thanksgiving a few years ago. I'd spent a week crafting a large, intricate end-grain cutting board from walnut and maple for my mother. It was heavy, solid, a mosaic of dark and light wood polished to a satin sheen. I was proud of it. I handed it to her, feeling that familiar, hopeful flicker in my chest. "Oh, Leo, this is nice," she said, testing its weight. Her eyes were already scanning the room, looking for a more important conversation. "Richard, look what Leo made." My father glanced over. "Good work, son," he mumbled, before turning his attention back to the football game on TV. A moment later, Claire clinked a glass for attention. She stood, radiant and confident, and announced her recent promotion to senior analyst. The room erupted. My mother beamed, pulling Claire into a hug that lasted a full minute. The rest of the evening was a blur of toasts to Claire, questions about her new role, and fawning praise from every aunt and uncle. My cutting board, the product of 40 hours of my life, sat on the kitchen counter, eventually buried under a stack of grocery bags. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was just tired. It was a familiar tiredness, the exhaustion of constantly bracing for an impact that always came. For years, I had told myself that swallowing my pride was the price of family peace. I was the family shock absorber. My role was to be quiet, to be understanding, to absorb the little slights and the grand oversights so that the family vehicle could keep rolling smoothly along. But I was starting to realize, with a dawning dread, that a shock absorber that takes too many hits eventually breaks. My father's quiet disapproval was the most complex piece of the puzzle. His own father, my grandfather, had been a carpenter. A damn good one, from the stories I heard. He built his own house, his own furniture, a legacy of skill that my father chose not to follow. He opted for a safe, stable career in insurance, and I often wondered if he carried a quiet regret for the road not taken. When he looked at my workshop and my calloused hands and sawdust-covered clothes, I never saw simple disappointment in his eyes. It was a murky, complicated cocktail of emotions I couldn't decipher. Maybe he saw a reflection of his own father, or maybe he saw a life he was too afraid to live himself. Either way, my career choice was a constant, unspoken commentary in our relationship, and his silence on the matter was heavier than any criticism. So, when Claire announced her engagement to Mark, a guy from family whose wealth made ours look like pocket change, I knew the dynamic would only intensify. The announcement came, predictably, at a lavish dinner Claire orchestrated. She stood up, flashed a diamond the size of a small bird's egg, and the entire family apparatus kicked into high gear. The shock absorber was about to be put to the test. Over the next year, our family's communication became a one-woman show titled Claire's Perfect Wedding. The family group chat, once a place for birthday wishes and random news, was now a 24/7 feed of venue photos, dress fittings, and countdowns. My mother would call me, and the conversation would inevitably pivot to floral arrangements within 30 seconds. I was never asked to be a groomsman. Mark's party was filled with his college buddies and a second cousin I was sure he'd only met twice. It stung, but I rationalized it. It's his day, his friends. I'm a quiet brother. I probably wouldn't enjoy it anyway. Lie after lie, I told myself, reinforcing the walls of the box they had built for me. I decided, with a weary sense of duty, that I would play my part. I would be the supportive, quiet brother. I would show up, I would smile, I would clap, and I would fade into the background. It was the price of peace. I just didn't realize how high the price had become. The rehearsal dinner was the prelude, the quiet tremor before the earthquake. It was held at an upscale restaurant with low lighting and hushed tones, the kind of place where the waiters moved with silent, ghostly efficiency. I made a point to be on time, dressed in a suit that felt stiff and foreign compared to my usual work clothes. I was carrying a small, heavy object wrapped in velvet cloth. It was a wedding gift, an early one. I had spent the better part of a month designing and crafting a small ring box from a single piece of bird's eye maple. The wood had a beautiful, shimmering grain, and I'd carved their initials C and M into the lid in a subtle, elegant script. The inside was lined with dark blue velvet. It was a piece of me, a piece of my craft, a testament to permanence I hoped their marriage would have. I thought, naively, that a gift of time and skill might cut through the noise. I found Claire holding court with her future mother-in-law, a woman named Beatrice who wore her wealth like a suit of armor. Claire was laughing, a high, brittle sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Leo, you made it," she said, her gaze flicking over my shoulder as if looking for someone more important. "Of course. This is for you guys," I said, holding out the wrap box. "Something for the rings." She took it from me, her manicured fingers brushing against mine. "Oh, how thoughtful." She gave a little shake, as if to gauge its worth by its rattle. Beatrice, her mother-in-law, smiled a thin, bloodless smile. "That's sweet of him, Claire," Beatrice said, her tone suggesting it was sweet in the way a child's crayon drawing is sweet. Claire placed the box on the table beside her purse. "Thank you, Leo. We'll open it later." Later never came. For the rest of the dinner, the box sat there, an unopened testament to my misplaced effort. I watched as it was nudged aside to make room for a wine bucket, then partially obscured by Beatrice's cashmere shawl. It was a perfect, painful metaphor for my place in the proceedings. I tried to engage with my parents. My mother was deep in conversation with one of Claire's bridesmaids about the logistics of the flower delivery. When I approached, she patted my arm. "It's all coming together, isn't it? Your sister has done an incredible job." She said, "Your sister," as if Claire were a distant, admirable celebrity we both followed. My father was locked in a stilted conversation with Mark's father about the stock market, nodding along, but looking deeply uncomfortable. He saw me, gave a curt nod, and turned back to the discussion of portfolios. I was an island. I left the dinner feeling a familiar coldness seep into my bones. As I walked out, I glanced back at their table. The little velvet-wrapped box was still there, a dark, forgotten square on a sea of white linen. With a pang in my chest, I walked back, picked it up, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. The polished wood felt cold against my heart. The next day was the wedding. The venue was breathtaking, a sprawling lakeside estate that must have cost a fortune. White roses dripped from every archway, and string lights twinkled in the crisp autumn air. It was a scene of manufactured perfection. I wore my best suit, the one reserved for weddings and funerals. I was carrying a different gift this time, a large, heavy box containing the absurdly expensive Vitamix blender from their registry. I was done offering pieces of my soul. This time, I was offering a transaction, just like everyone else. I walked into the reception hall, a grand ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. The low hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses filled the air. I found a seating chart near the entrance, a large, ornate board with names written in perfect, flowing calligraphy. I scanned the list. Adams, Brooks, Carter. I kept scanning. I got to the end of the alphabet. No Leo. My stomach tightened. I scanned it again, more slowly. Nothing. Then I saw it. Tucked into the bottom right corner, outside the main alphabetical list, was a small, handwritten note, almost an afterthought. The ink was a different color, the script a hurried scrawl that looked nothing like the elegant calligraphy of the other names. It simply said, Leo, Table 19. A wave of something hot and sharp, like shame, washed over me. I felt like a party crasher at my own sister's wedding. I found one of the ushers, a young woman in a black dress. "Excuse me, can you tell me where Table 19 is?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She glanced at the chart, then at my face, a flicker of pity in her eyes. "Oh, right this way, sir." She didn't lead me into the main ballroom. She led me past the gleaming tables, past the laughing guests, toward a side exit I hadn't noticed before. We went through a service door and into a narrow, brightly lit alcove. It was a functional space, not a festive one. On one side was the swinging door to the kitchen, which burst open every few seconds with a blast of noise and shouted orders as servers bustled in and out. On the other side were the doors to the men's and women's restrooms. And there, in the middle of the alcove, was Table 19. It wasn't a table. It was a single white plastic folding chair. It sat there, stark and alone, under the harsh glare of a fluorescent light. There was no centerpiece, no linen, no place setting. Just a chair. Taped to its back was a small, handwritten card that said Leo. I stared at it. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. This had to be a mistake. A joke. A cruel, elaborate prank. Just then, Jessica, Claire's maid of honor, bustled past on her way to the restroom. She stopped short when she saw me standing there, staring at the lone chair. She had the grace to look momentarily embarrassed. "Oh, Leo," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She gestured toward the chair. "Claire was just so worried you'd be overwhelmed by all the noise and people in the main hall. She said you're more the quiet type anyway, and she thought you'd be more comfortable back here." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was a decision. A calculated, deliberate act of cruelty disguised as consideration. They had weaponized my own personality against me. They had taken my quiet nature, my preference for substance over spectacle, and twisted it into a justification for banishing me from my own family celebration. I looked past Jessica, through the service door, and into the grand ballroom. I could see my family at a table near the front. My mother was laughing, her head thrown back. My father was smiling at something Mark's father had said. And I saw Claire, radiant at the head table, clinking glasses with her new, wealthy in-laws. I saw her glance toward the alcove, her eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second. There was no surprise in her expression, no concern, just a flicker of something cold and dismissive before she turned back to her guests. That was the moment the shock absorber finally broke. The years of quiet slights, of being overlooked and undervalued, of telling myself to just be understanding, it all collapsed into a single point of cold, hard clarity. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even a background character. I was set dressing. I was a problem to be managed, a loose end to be tucked away out of sight. I gave Jessica a slow, deliberate nod. My face was a mask, betraying none of the roiling fury inside me. "Thank you for letting me know," I said, my voice unervingly calm. I turned away from the folding chair. I walked back into the main hall, moving with a strange sense of lightness, of purpose. I walked directly to the gift table, a grand display piled high with elegantly wrapped boxes. I took the heavy Vitamix box and placed it squarely in the center of the table, right next to the towering, 7-tiered wedding cake. I wanted it to be seen. Then, without a word to anyone, I turned and walked out of the ballroom, out of the estate, and into the cool, dark night. The gravel of the parking lot crunched under my dress shoes. I didn't look back when I heard the ballroom door open behind me. I didn't stop when I heard a frantic voice, Claire's voice, call my name. "Leo, Leo, where are you going?" I stopped and turned. She was running across the gravel in her massive white dress and impractical heels, her perfect hair coming undone, her face a mask of panicked disbelief. "What does it look like?" I said, my voice flat. "You can't just leave. What is wrong with you?" she gasped, stopping a few feet away. What's wrong with me? I let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. You put your own brother on a folding chair next to the bathrooms, Claire. You hid me like a piece of embarrassing luggage you didn't want your new, rich family to see. Her face crumpled, the beautiful bridal mask cracking. It wasn't like that. I thought you'd be more comfortable. You've always been so sensitive. You don't like crowds. Stop, I said, holding up a hand. The word was quiet, but it had the force of a slammed door. Stop insulting my intelligence. You didn't do it for my comfort. You did it for yours. I was an inconvenience to your perfect picture. I saw the truth in her eyes then. The flicker of guilt, quickly extinguished by a lifetime of self-justification. I am your brother, I said, the words feeling heavy and final. And that should have been worth more than a plastic chair. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned my back on my sister, standing alone in her perfect dress in the middle of a dark parking lot, and walked to my car. As I closed the door, I heard the sound I had been absorbing my whole life. The sound of my sister beginning to cry, knowing the performance would bring everyone else running to her side. This time, I just drove away. I drove for hours that night, the highways of New Jersey a blur of sodium lamps and taillights. I had no destination. The car was a quiet, insulated capsule, a buffer against the world I had just left behind. Inside me, a storm of emotions raged, a white-hot fury, a profound, cavernous grief, and beneath it all, a strange and terrifying sense of liberation. The shock absorber hadn't just broken. It had been jettisoned from the vehicle entirely. I was on my own, running on a new kind of fuel. When I finally pulled into my own driveway around 3 a.m., my apartment felt like a foreign country. It was silent, utterly, blessedly silent. My phone, which I had ignored, was a beacon of chaos on the kitchen counter. 32 missed calls. 15 from my mother, 10 from Claire, a surprising 4 from my dad, and a handful from various aunts. And one text message that I did read from my cousin Mike. It said, "Heard what happened. Claire is telling everyone you had a breakdown. Don't let them spin this. What they did was messed up. Call me if you need anything." Mike, he was a bit of an outsider himself, a musician who had also disappointed the family's corporate ambitions. His message was a lifeline in a sea of manipulation. It was external validation that I wasn't crazy, that the folding chair was as insulting as it felt. I didn't reply, not yet, but I held on to his words. I turned my phone off and slept for 10 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep of pure exhaustion. The next morning, the digital onslaught began in earnest. I turned my phone on and the notifications hit like a tidal wave. The family group chat had exploded. "Mom, Daniel Leo, you need to call me immediately. Your sister is devastated. You ruined the most important day of her life. You owe her an apology. Aunt Carol, I can't believe you would be so selfish. Claire worked so hard on this wedding. Dad, call your mother." It was a masterclass in gaslighting. They weren't angry about what they had done to me. They were furious that I had refused to quietly accept it. My reaction was the problem, not their action. I was the one who was selfish. I was the one who had ruined things. A few days later, the other shoe dropped. Mike sent me a link with a simple message. Brace yourself. It was a link to Claire's Facebook page. She had written an open letter to my beloved brother. It was a long, rambling, self-pitying masterpiece of emotional manipulation. I can still remember parts of it verbatim. To my dear brother, Leo, wherever you are, my heart is broken. I write this not in anger, but in sorrow. On what should have been the happiest day of my life, a shadow was cast by an absence I cannot comprehend. Family is complicated, and weddings are chaotic. In a whirlwind of it all, I fear feelings were unintentionally hurt. I only wish you could have found the strength to talk to me, to forgive the small, unintentional slights that can happen when stress is high. I never expected you to abandon me, to walk away and leave such a gaping hole in our family photos and in my heart. I am praying you find peace and realize that family is more important than pride. There it was, the final, public twist of the knife. I was not only the villain. I was mentally fragile, a man ruled by pride who had abandoned his loving family over a small, unintentional slight. The comment section was a sickening flood of sympathy for her. "You are so strong, Claire. Family is everything. I hope he comes to his senses. Some people just have to be the center of attention." A cold, calm anger settled over me. It wasn't a hot rage from the wedding night. This was different. It was the precise, focused anger of a craftsman who sees a shoddy, dishonest piece of work. She had built a false narrative. I was going to deconstruct it. I didn't reply on Facebook. That was her arena, a place of emotional performance. I would respond in mine, a place of tangible facts and cold, hard evidence. I spent the next evening not in my workshop, but at my computer. I was using a different set of tools, but the goal was the same: to build something true. I registered a domain name, https://www.google.com/search?Q=thevalueofacete.com. It was simple, clean, and to the point. I designed a single, minimalist web page. No ads, no fancy fonts, no emotional language. Just evidence. At the top of the page, I wrote a single sentence: "Value is shown, not just spoken." A narrative has been presented about the events at my sister's wedding. Here is the evidence. Draw your own conclusions. Below that, I arranged 4 exhibits. Exhibit A, the seat. I had, in a moment of cold clarity before I walked out, snapped a picture with my phone. It was a stark, almost artistic photo. The single white folding chair, starkly lit, positioned between the swinging kitchen door and the generic restroom signs. You could see a discarded napkin on the floor nearby. Exhibit B, the invitation. A photo of the seating chart, with an arrow pointing to my name, handwritten in a different ink, physically separate from the calligraphed list of every other guest. The caption read, "A last-minute addition." Exhibit C, the gift. A screenshot of the email confirmation for the $600 Vitamix blender, purchased from her official registry. The timestamp was 2 weeks before the wedding. The caption read, "A transaction." Exhibit D, the other gift. A clean, well-lit photo of the handmade bird's eye maple ring box sitting on my workbench. Its intricate grain and polished surface spoke of time, care, and skill. The caption read, "A gesture." This was returned to my pocket, unopened. That was it. No long-winded story. No accusations. No emotion. I let the facts speak for themselves. The contrast between her tear-stained, emotional appeal and my cold, evidence-based presentation was, I knew, where the power lay. I didn't share it widely. I sent the link to Mike and a handful of trusted friends who had been asking what really happened. I said, "People are talking. If you want to share this, feel free. I'm done being silent." It spread like wildfire, first through my friends, then to their friends. Someone posted it in the comment section of Claire's open letter. The entire tone of the conversation shifted overnight. The narrative she had so carefully constructed crumbled under the weight of undeniable proof. The vague, unintentional slight was now a very specific, very intentional folding chair. Her story of a brother who abandoned her was now the story of a brother who was banished. The fallout was swift. The sympathetic comments on her post vanished, replaced by questions. Is that picture of the chair real? Why wasn't he on the main seating chart? You let him sit by the kitchen? Then came the phone call from my mother. Her voice was not the sorrowful, manipulative tone from the group chat. It was shrill, laced with pure fury. "What have you done?" she shrieked into the phone. "I presented the truth," I said calmly. "You have embarrassed this family. You aired our private business for the whole world to see." "No," I corrected her, my voice as level as a finished tabletop. "Claire aired our private business. She did it first, and she did it with lies. I just provided the receipts. There's a difference." There was a sputtering sound on the other end of the line. Your sister is a mess. She won't stop crying. You need to take that website down right now." "No," I said again. The word felt solid, like old growth oak. "I don't think I will. The website isn't about her anymore. It's about me. It's a reminder for myself of what happens when I allow other people to decide my worth." "You are selfish. You have always been the selfish one," she yelled. "Is it selfish to want a seat at the table?" I asked, and for the first time in my life, I didn't wait for her answer. I hung up. The silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I had ever heard. The weeks that followed were defined by a profound silence from my family. The angry texts stopped. The manipulative phone calls ceased. It wasn't a peaceful silence, not at first. It was the heavy, resentful silence of people who have lost control of the story and don't know what to do next. Claire deleted her Facebook account entirely. The open letter, and a mountain of comments calling her out, vanished into the digital ether. The shaming had been so public, so thorough, that there was no narrative left for them to spin. About a month after I launched the website, a large brown box appeared on my doorstep. It was heavy. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The Vitamix in its original, unopened packaging. The shipping label was printed. The return address listed only a generic postal service center. There was no note, no apology, no explanation, just a return transaction, a silent admission that the game was over. I left the box on my porch for a day before hauling it to my car and donating it to a local shelter. I didn't want it in my house. The real shift happened more slowly. My cousin Mike started coming by the workshop on Saturdays. We'd work on a small project, drink a beer, and talk about music with anything but our family. We were building something new, a relationship based on mutual respect, not obligation. He told me, one afternoon, that the fallout on Claire's side had been brutal. A few of her bridesmaids were distant. Her new in-laws, so desperate to avoid any social unpleasantness, had reportedly been coolly polite. She had tried to buy her way into their world, and the price had been her integrity. The most unexpected visitor was my father. He showed up at the workshop one Tuesday afternoon, unannounced. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, his eyes scanning the racks of lumber, the finished pieces, the organized chaos of my work life. He looked old and tired. Just driving by, he said his excuse thin. I nodded, not stopping my work, running a hand plane over a long piece of cherrywood. The blade made a soft, satisfying shhhhh sound. He walked over to a rocking chair I had just finished, its lines clean and classic. He ran a hand along the curved armrest, the same way I would, feeling for imperfections. Your grandfather, he said, his voice quiet. He would have been proud of this. Of all this. He didn't say he was proud. He said my grandfather would have been. It was as close as he could get, a confession and an apology wrapped in the legacy of another man. He didn't mention Claire, or my mother, or the wedding. He didn't have to. We stood there for a few minutes in a silence that was, for the first time, comfortable. When he left, something had been mended. Not the whole dam, but a small, crucial crack had been sealed. Months passed. The seasons changed. I finished a big commission, took a short vacation to Maine, and felt the tight knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for years finally begin to loosen. I was breathing easier. I was living on my own terms. My life was my own. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it. I'm sorry. I was wrong. That was it. 2 sentences. I knew it was from Claire. An apology, 6 months too late, stripped of all its self-pitying adornments. A year ago, those words would have been everything to me. I would have wept with relief. I would have called her immediately, ready to forgive, ready to resume my role as the shock absorber, just for the relief of having the conflict be over. I read the words again. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No pity. It was like reading a weather report from a distant city. It was information, but it had no bearing on my current climate. The apology she thought I needed was no longer relevant, because the man who needed it no longer existed. He had walked out of that wedding reception and had never come back. I placed my phone face down on the workbench. I picked up my hand plane, the one my father had touched. I set the blade against the edge of a fresh piece of wood. The world went quiet, replaced by the steady rhythm of my own work, the whisper of steel on wood, the satisfying scent of cedar and patience. I was building something real, something with value, and it was all mine.